Hello, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in today. My name is Michael Sutton. I'm a first-year medical student here at WVU. And today we're joined by Dr. Allison. Before I introduce him formally, though, I do have to let you guys know that you should have gotten notification that this meeting is being recorded. Now, we don't do anything with the video, but the audio files, we post them onto our YouTube channel, which is WVU Walk with the Future Doc. And so feel free to check us out there. We also have a Facebook page with the same name, WVU Walk with a Future Doc. That's where we post all of our flyers for our upcoming walks. And we also post a few other things, like we post some pieces of advice from docs, or we post some recipes sometimes. So it's a great place to follow us if you have a Facebook. But with that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Dr. Robert Allison. He's a family medicine physician here in Morgantown. And so he treats just about everyone, but he has a special interest in treating the geriatric population. And today's talk is about the importance of staying active as an elderly individual. You know, I think in the United States in 2022, staying active is a challenge for just about everyone. But I think it's especially a challenge for the elderly population. And that's unfortunate, because I think it's especially important for elderly individuals to stay active. And Dr. Allison will be talking about why it's so important and the best strategies that you can use to stay active, especially if you are elderly. So with that out of the way, Dr. Allison, I'll hand it off to you. So he'll be giving us a brief introduction to the topic, and then we can open it up to questions after that. So Dr. Allison, I'll hand off to you.
Sounds good, Michael. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invite. Very excited to be here. And although I'm not outside like Michael, I definitely think this is a great opportunity to get out and walk around, and maybe even just get a few little pearls or tips or tricks, or if you are a community member, implementing some of this into your daily routine, because it is hard. You're right, Michael, to get out and move and be active for everybody. And especially as we get older, that need to be physically active does not go away. It actually gets harder. And it gets harder because of all the other comorbidities or the other ailments that happen as we get older. Not the least of which to mention is something like arthritis. So, you know, it's easy to think of as a young medical student that will never get old and will never be able or unable to walk or run or move as quickly as we want to. But those are something that the older population has to focus on and doesn't take for granted, that being the ability to simply get up and out of a chair. So when I think about activity in older adults, I have to keep in mind that we have to start with a framework. And that framework doesn't really change throughout adult life. So the framework is simply a goal of 30 minutes of moderate aerobic activity, about 5 times a week. Now that can be challenging, but that's the goal. And then you add in about 2 days per week of weight training. So it's more about the aerobic activity than it is about the weight training or anaerobic activity. That's important, but not as important as the cardiovascular benefits from aerobic activity. So how do we do that? So something simple that I talk to a lot of patients about this time of year in particular, because they are getting into this New Year's resolution. They say, hey, it's after the holiday. I want to get healthy again. What can I do? Should I just go out there and start walking 20 to 30 minutes on a treadmill? No, simply it's about a 5-minute walk, even around their house in the middle of COVID, in the middle of this ice storm. So 5 minutes, maybe twice a day to start walking around is huge. That's all I would do. That's all I have them do. But I don't stop there. So I say, hey, do a 5-minute walk, maybe in the morning, and then maybe at night. And then do that maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday. From there, then I have them bump it up to 10 minutes twice a day. And do that for a week or two. And then I try to get them to about 15 minutes twice a day. And if they're very ambitious, then they can put all of that time together and go 30 minutes once a day. So it's a gradual increase in activity. So that's the easiest and basic part of activity. But something simple in their daily routines. When we're not in the midst of a pandemic, I'll usually have them say, hey, park as far as you can away in the grocery store and walk around. Try not to use a motorized device and really try to focus on some things that you could do at home. And those are things like yoga, Tai Chi, even enrolling in some dance classes would be a good idea. So any type of moderate activity, it doesn't have to be running, cycling, swimming. It can be some alternatives. And there's a lot of benefit and a lot of good studies that focus on Tai Chi to improve not only pain and flexibility, but sleep and possibly cognition. So what do we do about the people that aren't as physically active? We classify them as frail. And frail older adults have some either physical limitations or maybe some strength limitations. And so their gradual increased exercise routine is very staggered, meaning we start very simply and we go from there. So let's say that they are wheelchair bound. I'd want them to do about 8 to 15, and this is coming from the American Academy of Sports Medicine, exercise routines for 65 and above. So it's 8 to 15 reps, and we do at least 1 set of each rep. And so if they're chair bound, then it's something simple like heel lifts or toe lifts. And then once we get that down, then it's a sit to stand. And once we've worked on the lower extremities, then it is something simple as forward arm raises, side arm raises. And if they can now get out of the chair, it's wall push-ups. So that's for the very basic first stage of strength training for chair-bound individuals. From there, if they can get up, then it's balance training. And this is about 2+ hours a week. So you can break that up into multiple 30-minute sessions or even 15-minute sessions. And really we're focusing on a 5 to 10 second interval of holding this balance per rep. And we're looking for at least 1 set per rep. And when we start at the beginning, it's flat. And so it's standing, just simply standing in place for 5 seconds. From there, we spread our feet as if we're going to walk. So that semi-tandem gait, where one foot is in front of the other, but the heel and the toe are not touching. We hold that position for 5 to 10 seconds. Then it's a tandem stand for 5 to 10 seconds. And then we can start doing some single leg balancing or some heel standing or toe standing, working on a flat surface. And then from there, you work on uneven or complex tasks. These get a little bit more advanced, but just to wrap up, it's something like using steps, so stepping up and stepping down without your hands. So starting at the first step, just stepping up on that and then stepping back down. From there, it's forward and backwards walking. And this could be on an uneven surface, so it has to be done safely, preferably with somebody by their side in case they fall, or it's where it's not too slippery. Secondly, it's sideways walk. Thirdly, it's sideways walking. And then it's changing directions while walking or almost running like an obstacle course, doing a zigzag. And then finally, the complex tasks, as we talked about briefly, that is navigating obstacles. So putting maybe a chair or something in the middle of your route and having to navigate it. putting objects on the ground and focusing on walking and picking up objects. And then lastly, doing some activity while walking, talking, carrying on a conversation. There's even a suggestion of doing math problems. So those are the basics of frailty and exercise, and starting with a base of general exercise between 150 minutes to 300 minutes of physical activity. I hope that helped. That's about 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I should say, if anyone has a question to Dr. Allison, please put it in the chat. So I guess while we're waiting for some people to ask some questions, I guess my question is, so I have a friend, his name is James, and he's a power lifter, and he says he's a year older than me, so he's about 23, and he says that, well, I have about 10 years left to build muscle, right? 10 years left, and then after that, it's just a decline. And you can sort of you can slow the decline. But he says, yeah, 10 years, I got to build as much muscle as I can during that time. But in your introduction, you seem to imply that it is possible to build muscle, or at the very least increase strength significantly in old age. That is not just about maintaining what you already have. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about perhaps some of the successes that you've seen in your clinical practice, and not just maintaining an elderly individual's strength, but actually improving it significantly over time.
Good question. So the 2 days of anaerobic weight training is more for helping bone density, really, and to prevent osteoporosis. It's not as much to increase lean muscle mass. And your friend isn't wrong. I was just reading a study actually yesterday about unintentional weight loss in older adults. And there is a noticeable loss in lean muscle mass starting in the second and third decades of life. So between 20 and 30, we start losing lean muscle mass. Unfortunately, we gain adipose tissue up until about 65, 75 years of age. We typically peak at our maximum weight if we're not trying to lose weight, and if we're not overly eating, like we're not being just gluttons, at about 60. So when I see somebody in the office, my goal is to maximize their function. And it's really to make that, or have them continue doing what they want to do, whether that's playing with their grandchildren, or whether it's being a marathon runner who just went and did a half marathon in South Carolina. I have a 78-year-old who just did a marathon before the holidays, but she's been doing it. So a success story of someone that turned their life around. He was more of a younger man. He was in his 50s, and he got diagnosed with diabetes. He was a glutton. He wasn't really watching what he was eating, self-admittedly, and he got on a very strict diet. He started walking, dropped about 30 pounds, and his A1C dropped significantly. So I think I can't speak to the powerlifting. I'm a big advocate of cardiovascular health and aerobic exercise. There I see the major benefits in cardiovascular disease, diabetic control, and cholesterol control. So that's really where my focus is. I wish I could tell you I know some bodybuilders at 70, but I don't. I think you're muted.
Oh, thank you. I don't know why I was muted. Thank you. So we have a question in the chat from Dr. Neild, and her question is, at what age do you consider elderly and geriatric, right? Like at what age do you think that this advice to improve and maintain mobility applies? Because usually you wouldn't think of someone who's like 50 years old, even if they have diabetes, to be geriatric, right?
Right. Yeah. And so that's kind of where the family medicine hat comes into play, because I do. I take care of babies all the way up through grandmas and grandpas. And I think physical activity is huge for all stages of life. The definition of geriatric, it's a little gray, but generally starts at 65. But the nice thing is that the exercise goals, at least from what I counsel my patients on, don't change. So it should be 150 minutes of moderate activity over a week for everybody. And so that really doesn't change. And so that can be applied to everyone.
Okay. So even for someone significantly younger than 65, you think those targets, two bouts of strength training and like 150 minutes of aerobic exercise, you think that's pretty appropriate for like just the average person who's not elderly?
That's what I tell my 40-year-old guy that comes in and says, my wife dragged me in. I think I'm fine, but he's overweight. His blood pressure's a little bit up. His fasting glucose is maybe above 100. So he's pre-diabetic. He may be hypertensive and he's overweight, but not obese. I say, hey, why don't we start getting you on an exercise routine? And the goal I want you to do is get up to 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week, and throw in a little bit of light weight training about twice a week. That's my standard spiel. And interesting, as I was preparing for this talk and looking at some of the geriatric literature, that's what they also suggest. So it's interestingly universal for everyone.
Okay.
To start, it can be more than that, but I should say that that's the minimum criteria.
Okay. We just got another question from my friend Garrett. He asks, are there any specific kinds of aerobic activities that you would not recommend for individuals as they age in terms of the impact on joint health?
Great question, Garrett. And I think it's tailored to their body habitus. So, someone with spinal stenosis may not be able to walk very long or get on a treadmill and walk. But you put them in a pool and just that free floating feeling in the pool, they can do pretty good aerobic exercise or even kind of pool aerobics. So I think that it depends on their condition. If they have a knee replacement, I really would like them to try to get out and walk around. It's not going to limit them unless there's some really bad pain or there's some joint stiffness that they can't get rid of. I don't want them to hurt themselves. But no, I don't think that there is an overarching umbrella to say no one above the age of 65 should be doing X, Y, or Z. It's all within moderation, but it also is based on their comorbidities. And I usually will tailor that to that individual and get them to something that's the most comfortable. I don't want them hurting while they're exercising, because I want them to continue to do it and at least not be miserable and hopefully enjoy it.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I know a lot of people are concerned about running in particular, that running perhaps, is a bit tougher on the joints, but even running, you would certainly not preclude that from any individual that was like interested, even if they were above 65.
Correct. As long as they were neurovascularly intact, like they didn't have Parkinson's or they didn't have some other type of movement disorder, I would say yes. I think if they wanted to start with a brisk walk and then start to increase their running, if they felt that was something they wanted to do, by all means. I'll say it's rare. I have not really had too many people after the age of 65 pick up running, but I have several young ladies, I think they look physically young. She's 78, but she looks fantastic for her age. She is really a great runner and she loves running. So I'm not going to stop her from doing that. I think that the chronologic age and the physical age often will mirror each other, but sometimes they don't. And so I'm not saying, hey, you've hit 65 and you've run 3 marathons in your life and you want to keep running. No, you can't do it because you're over the age of 65. No, I don't think that that's the case at all.
Right. Yeah. And on that note, we actually have a very personal question from April. Thank you so much for this question, April. She says, I don't consider myself geriatric by any means, but I do know that arthritis has set into my hips at the age of 48. And how do I work and get past that pain? I've been feeling it from bike riding and moderate daily exercise, and she is trying to lose weight. So is there a specific recommendation that you would give to April? Because I think there are probably a lot of people in similar positions like that.
For sure. And arthritis can crop up at any age. I would make sure first and foremost that there has been a medical evaluation done of the hip for April or anyone dealing with this, because we do want to make sure that there isn't something underlying the pain. And as long as there is an appropriate medical workup and there's nothing that's causing the pain except known arthritis, then it is all about maximizing what you can do. So maybe it's not going out and walking or running. Maybe it is aqua therapy or getting in a pool. Maybe it is Tai Chi or yoga. Maybe it is other types of Pilates, different things that don't put as much stress on the leg, the knee, and the hip, but can still improve that cardiovascular health.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So again, it's like that's a common trend for a lot of people, whether they have like chronic diseases like arthritis, but just elderly, that like the importance of exercise that's very low impact.
I'm a big fan of it, although, I do like to run. I think as we all get older, we should be finding something that doesn't totally destroy our bodies. You hear about some people that have run all their lives and their knees hurt. So there is some evidence to say that, right, some high impact can be stressful on the knees and the joints. However, I'm not going to ever say if someone loves to run that they should stop running. I just want them to continue to do what they enjoy. So I would say we all have to find that level of exercise that we're comfortable with and enjoy, but don't put our bodies through unnecessary stress.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few questions in chat. Hopefully we'll get to them all eventually, but I want to go to this question because it's related to what we've been talking about from Leah. She asks, are there legitimate recommendations for different combinations of activities for different disease states or stages in life, such as, the amount of cardio versus strength training for individuals who are motivated in that way? I actually think we talked a bit about stages of life, and that your recommendation would be, it doesn't really matter what stage of life you're at, that 150 minutes of cardio and 2 bouts of weight training a week is pretty good for just about everyone. But I think going to the different disease states, particularly, I guess, chronic metabolic disease and maybe other autoimmune diseases. How else, aside from like very low impact, are there any other modifications that you would make if someone has a chronic disease?
Sure. So I think the two that pop into my mind that I see the most are hip and knee arthritis or arthritis, whether it's been replaced or headed towards replacement, and the movement disorders that tend to affect but are not limited to older adults. And that would be something like Parkinson's or Huntington's chorea, or something as profound as maybe multi-system atrophy or progressive supranuclear palsy, which are all part of the Parkinson's family. When you have, let's start with the arthritis, something like hip and knee arthritis, I would suggest, and going back to that point about April, something like a more of a stretching and a biomechanic type of exercise. The best thing that's out there for the older adults is Tai Chi, but again, yoga, Pilates, anything like that. And then for their hips and knees, if they wanted to get more aerobic, I might offload them, either see what an elliptical does, but that's probably going to still put some wear and tear, and that takes a lot of coordination. And so probably some water aerobics or some type of aqua therapy. For the movement disorders, the biggest thing there absolutely is Tai Chi, but there also is some Parkinson's boxing classes that are held as well through WVU. And so those are pretty interesting and fun, and people really enjoy them. So that's something that I heard about recently, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Okay. So it sounds like there's no one way, but I guess the overarching theme, even more so than low impact, is just doing what feels comfortable, and if it hurts, not to do it, right?
That's the big takeaway, right? And always confer with your PCP and make sure that this is something that you should take up. It shouldn't be something that you just decide tomorrow to go pick up and go start running, 2 and 3 miles, and then the next day you're hurting and you go to them and say, well, why do I hurt? Well, we probably should have talked about this before you did that.
Yeah. We have a question from iPhone A. I don't know who you are, iPhone A, but thank you for the question anyway. How can family members and friends support an older person who wants to start exercising?
I think they can get in there and do it with them. So in light of COVID, I get that. But I think there is a fine line between being supportive and then being pushy. So I think it has to start with the family member. If they're interested, then encouraging and motivating them, maybe going to their doctor's appointment with them and seeing what types of physical activity would be appropriate for that individual, and then working with the doctor and the family members to come up with a plan to be supportive in getting that person moving, because it's tricky to be a family member and see somebody who's not as physically active as they should be, but you don't want to also be a thorn in their side and not be encouraging. So I would say be supportive, go to their doctor's appointments, and come up with a plan that works for everybody.
Okay. So it's always a winning strategy. Let's see, we had a couple more questions in chat. So this is an interesting one. What are your thoughts about carrying light weights when walking? Do you think that provides some added benefit, or do you potentially think that might be difficult on the joints?
I think that, someone else asked me that just the other day in clinic, and I think it's a great idea if it's doable. And, if they have the grip strength, the coordination, and it's not going to be, I said something as simple as a 1 pound weight. And I would do that. Now, maybe I wouldn't do it the whole time to start. I probably would have them start with the weight and maybe do 5 or 10 minutes and then put the weight down and finish their exercise. If they were going for 20 or 30 minutes, I wouldn't go the whole time until they knew they could do it, but I don't think that it's unreasonable if they felt like it was giving them some type of added benefit.
Okay. And if I could just ask a related question, something that I've seen before is people walking with ankle weights, with light ankle weights. Do you think that that could also work to increase strength?
I do. Yeah, I think that's fine. It probably, I have no data to support this, but maybe it improves range of motion because they're picking that foot up from a heavier standpoint when the weight is on, and then when the weight is off, they might clear their step or clear their toe as they walk because that weight isn't on there and they're picking it up more. Again, I have nothing to support that, but it makes just logical sense. So yeah, I don't think it's a problem as long as they can walk with it and it doesn't lead them to catching their toe or catching their heel for whatever reason while they're walking. So it has to be done safely. And again, I'd probably do that first half or even quarter of the exercise, take it off and finish because they are going to get tired. I don't want them to get tired and have this extra weight on. So I would say yes, in moderation, and if it's done safely, as long as they can clear their toe with the walking step.
Yeah, for sure. I see. Yeah. So I guess those are two unique things for everyone in the audience to try if you're up to it. we have a question from Sarah. She asks, what are some of the biggest barriers to exercise for elderly individuals? So, yeah, that's a very broad question, but I would like to hear your thoughts, Dr. Allison. What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced? And I think we've talked about some of them already, but is there anything that you think maybe we haven't talked about that you really see as a very large barrier for particularly elderly individuals to start exercising?
And maybe it was iPhone A or somebody, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, is the isolation. That's the biggest thing that a lot of older adults are facing right now, is that, and rightfully so, they're trying to protect themselves and stay safe in this time of a pandemic. And so they are staying in, they are potentially alone, and they don't have the motivation to get out and walk or be as physically active, even if they like to go grocery shopping. Now, some individuals have figured out how to get groceries delivered, or family members are delivering it. So they're not even walking around the grocery store once a week. So I think that the pandemic, the social isolation is one of the biggest things. And that can translate then into potentially being what's generally referred to, which is, again, just a clinical term, as institutionalized, or they end up in a long-term care facility for whatever reason. And once they are there, it is harder to get them motivated to do something at times. Now, there are some people that love to walk around, and that's fabulous, and I encourage that. But it's a little bit harder when they become nursing home bound to get them to exercise as well. So I think the isolation is the hardest thing that I find because of the current state of affairs.
I see. Would you have any tips, I guess, to overcome? I mean, because of course, as we know, COVID-19 is particularly dangerous for people. The older you are, the more likely you are to die if you get COVID or be seriously hospitalized. So I guess what is the best way to compromise sort of those two things, staying active and getting out, and perhaps, even being social, if that's your motivation, like if that serves motivation for you to get out and stay active? How do you balance that with staying safe from COVID-19?
Yeah, I think agenda setting is huge, and anticipatory planning. So even if it's not getting out and about, but setting a daily routine for all of us to say, all right, I'm going to get up at 8 or earlier or later, whatever your timeline gives you, but get up, get motivated, get moving, do something, and say, all right, I love to exercise right when I get up. So I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk around the house for 10 minutes. Yeah. Or I'm going to walk around my yard for 10 minutes if it's not, a snowstorm. So I think agenda setting is huge. I think trying to plan socially distanced exercising or family gatherings ahead of time is huge, and not just spur of the moment. But I would always caveat that with don't go if you don't feel safe. That's the biggest thing. But agenda setting and goal setting are huge. And that's what I would encourage people to do.
Okay. Hold on, let me check that. Let's see. Okay, April has another question. Is rhythm boxing something you would suggest for someone who has the hip pain?
I will plead total ignorance. I'm sorry, April. I don't know what rhythm boxing is. I think if it takes some of the stress off of the hip and you get your heart rate pumping and it's not too cumbersome, I wouldn't see there being a limit. But again, I don't know what it is, but if it can help you get the pain out of the hip and get moving, I don't think it's a bad idea, but don't take my word on that because I don't know exactly what it is.
Man, what is this? April really stumped you. Unthinkable.
She did. Rhythm boxing. Yeah. Maybe it's like maybe a Zumba-like type of thing with boxing.
Music, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. We also have a question from Linda. to get the most cardio out of walking, is it best to keep a steady gait or to add in some bursts of fast walking with slower walking in between?
That's a fabulous question. And was that Linda? Well done. Those interval types of exercise are fantastic if you can do that. Prefacing everything with let your body be your guide and don't do anything that feels unusual or uncomfortable. But yes, I think that type of exercise routine, not all the time, but is really helpful. It stresses your cardiac performance. It gets your VO2 max, which is your ability to maximize oxygen and pump it through the body. Gets that really going, and it's even better for your cardiac health. So yes, if you can do some days of interval training, I think it's a great idea. Not all the time, but sometimes I think it's great.
Okay. We don't have any new questions in the chat, so I guess I'll ask you a question, Dr. Allison. You have been crazy to think that you'd be able to go an hour with me managing the Q&A and not receive a question about diet. So Here it is. So, I mean, you guys know me. I love diet and nutrition. And I was wondering what you thought the role of diet was, and not just diet, but specifically the amount of protein and the importance of that to maintaining bone health and muscle health. Because my understanding is that as you get older, your ability, your stomach's ability to make stomach acid declines, right? And stomach acid is so important for digesting protein. And so a lot of elderly individuals eat less meat because they find it hard to digest. But my understanding is that actually our need for protein increases as we age. And I think, I guess leave it at that. So do you think that many elderly individuals are not getting enough protein, and maybe that's contributing to difficulty when they do try to exercise?
You know, I think that's a wonderful question, Michael, and I think that there's probably something to it. Looking at a lot of the recommended diets that are out there, and I was thinking about you preparing for this because I figured we'd talk about diet at one point. But some of the most commonly recommended diets for older adults, maybe on this pod or this chat, you've talked about the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. Those are really focusing on some of the plant-based approaches and vegetables, fruits, legumes. The interesting thing is the protein, it doesn't always have to come from animal protein. There's some discussion about and a lot of emphasis on the omega-3 fatty acids or fish and lean protein. So I think that we don't always have to get our pound of flesh, if you will, or that beef or that pork chop, or it doesn't need to be that type of animal type protein or that animal flesh. It can be plant-based proteins, and that may be the way to go, because decreasing the meat intake, you're right, is probably easier on their stomachs. And so I think that that's why a lot of these diets have focused on the plant-based proteins. The biggest one that's recommended in the United States that I saw for older adults, or the kind of the base where you can start talking about if they don't have cardiovascular disease, they don't have diabetes, is the My Plate method. Have you guys talked about My Plate on this chat before?
I don't think so.
So it's myplate.com or org, I don't remember. And there's My Plate for toddlers, there's My Plate for pregnancy, there's My Plate for older adults. And that's where I kind of steer people to start with. So it's a balance of fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, like unsaturated fats and oils, and then low fat or no fat dairy. And the proteins are really focusing on fish and poultry with some plant-based proteins. So I think that there's other ways to get proteins in. We could have a whole conversation about supplements, whether that's the Ensures or the Boosts or the Glucernas. But I think that protein is important, although sometimes I think we overdo it. So yes, it's important, but I would say there's alternatives to animal flesh and animal proteins.
And just to add to that, I think people would be surprised by the amount of protein that show up in vegetables, particularly legumes, leafy vegetables, and nuts and seeds.
For sure. Is that Melody? Thank you very much for that.
Of course, you're a nutrition expert, hard at work.
Absolutely. Yes. No, I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to put my foot in my mouth. So thank you for adding some validity to what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a lot of people miss vegetables as a source of protein. And I guess because vegetables have so few calories, but I think I was looking at lettuce the other day. I was looking at like the macronutrient breakdown, and lettuce is actually 25% protein, which is, pretty high. The average American's protein intake, I think, is only 12.5% a day. So if you want to increase your protein intake, yeah, it's not just eating meat, but even the vegetables that you wouldn't really think of as high protein, right?
Like I said, leafy greens.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is Kathy. You also want to spread your protein out throughout the whole day, not all at one meal. So if you have folks who only like to eat one meal a day, that can be problematic.
For sure. And that is common, that there was a study that suggested older adults may only eat one meal a day. And so then that becomes really tricky to balance nutritional intake for sure. Thank you, Kathy, as well.
Yeah. And if there was an older adult, so as a first-year medical student, I'm training to take histories, right? It's really quite a lot of fun. Sure beats studying antibiotics or something. But one of the questions that we're supposed to ask, especially older adults, is, how's your appetite, right? And it's difficult for me to sort of comprehend that question, right? It's like, my appetite's always been good, right? It's great. I can eat like, a pound of meat if I wanted to, right? But for adults who maybe don't have the appetite that they once did, do you have any recommendations for them, getting all of the nutrients that they need so that they feel better when they do exercise, right?
So yes, there's probably a correlation between nutritional intake and physical energy expenditure, for sure. My question, though, coming from a primary care standpoint, is more of a diagnostic question: is why? Why has their appetite changed? Are they falling into some type of cachexia syndrome, which is maybe thought to be an inflammatory state? Do they have something obstructing their GI tract? And so they get full more easily because there's some type of process that limits their stomach cavity. Is it because they have a blockage that they just fill up earlier? There's a whole bunch of medical questions that I would ask first to figure out why they aren't as hungry. So the takeaway here is, if there is somebody whose appetite has changed, then probably worth a diagnostic workup to figure out why. And if there isn't anything that is causing this, then the discussion on the return visit is, hey, great news. There's no reason why you don't have a change in appetite, which is a good thing. Let's focus on how we can maximize your protein calorie intake based on what you now feel like you have to eat or your desire to eat.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Let's see if there are any other questions in chat. Don't currently have any questions. I think we have time for a few more. So again, if you guys have questions to Dr. Allison, be sure to get them in the chat. Let's see. What else can we talk about, though? We've talked about diet. We've talked about different forms of exercise. Well, Dr. Allison, something that I know about you is that you are a great storyteller. And I was wondering if you had any success stories from your practice that you'd be able to share with us today to maybe inspire some of us to make the change.
Sure. Let me think if I have any good physical activity stories. Well, I can think of several. Yeah, I mean, it's just in general that being supportive, and I think the biggest thing as a primary care doctor is to highlight areas of improvement and find what motivates a patient. And sometimes, now rarely do I ever do this in my practice, is it kind of a finger waving fire and brimstone approach. That's just not who I am. So I'm much more supportive and encouraging. And when somebody sees that their numbers are not quite where they are, I've had several gentlemen and ladies kind of grab the bull by the horns, and 3 months later, they're down in their weight loss goal. And I didn't give them an extra diabetes pill, and I didn't give them an extra blood pressure pill. And they are very grateful and appreciative of that, because we were at a point to have that discussion to say, hey, your blood pressure is not quite where it needs to be. You're up another 5 pounds. Your A1C clicked up just a little bit. Why don't we work on getting this weight off rather than putting more medicine? And that usually goes over much better than putting more meds on, because it, to me, is a collaborative approach where, yeah, I can absolutely make your numbers and your labs look good with more and more drugs, but why don't we work together in improving your activity, improving your diet, and watch the numbers turn around and get better without more medication? So I just had that conversation with a gentleman on Thursday, and I'm kind of anxious. He seems very motivated. He just got over the holiday sweet rush, so now he wants to get back into it. And so that's kind of my approach for everybody. It's not one particular story. I'll still think if I can, or still see if I can think of one, but that's my general patient spiel, if you will, is let's do this together. I'm going to be there for you. I'm not going to ever wag my finger or get mad, but if we have to, we can use drugs and meds for sure, but let's do it the old fashioned way, through diet and exercise.
Right. Yeah, it's so funny, because that's something that we always talk about on this program, is that, lifestyle modifications are pretty much always superior to taking medications, because meds, they can compensate for the problem, but they can make your labs look better. But as far as I know, there's no drug that you can take that literally reverses insulin resistance, right? Like, there's no drug that you can take that excavates the plaque from your arteries. And so, yeah, it's great, but that's certainly a theme that we talk about all the time. So you heard it from Dr. Allison, the importance of lifestyle modifications. I think we have Lauren posted a survey that you guys can fill out. I think we have time for a couple more questions. It's only 9:52, but yeah, you guys feel free to open that survey and let us know if there's anything that we should improve on, or if there are any topics that you'd like to know about. The survey is your chance to give us some feedback. So we have another question from Linda, and this is something else that we talk about quite frequently on this show. Thoughts about drinking coffee and thoughts about drinking alcohol such as wine. And this is something that I have my own opinions on, but I think we'd be interested to hear your opinion on coffee and alcohol specifically. Obviously, you can get too much of it, right? But is it fine to just get a little bit?
Yeah, that pendulum has swung. So, and I think even as recently as maybe a few years ago, there was some consideration that a glass of wine and coffee may be beneficial for brain health. But the latest data that I saw came from 2019, and it was through the AARP. Now, granted, when I dug deeper, they did a lot of meta-analyses of a lot of scientific research. So although it came from a really general public awareness platform, it was rooted in some science, and I'm happy to share that with the group if needed, and I'd be happy to. But the latest recommendation is to now avoid caffeine and alcohol in terms of brain health. This was specifically talking about brain health, that there's no data right now that suggests even a glass of wine or a cup of coffee is helpful. And to Michael's point, I think, as you were alluding to, it can definitely, especially in terms of alcohol, be toxic to the brain. So one other caveat, which I'm surprised did not come up, were some of the brain boosting supplements We call those nootropics, nootropics. And one of them, Nariva, is a coffee fruit extract. That's really what Nareva is. And in all of this was a Cochrane 2018 study, didn't show that any of those supplements were helpful at cognitive impairment. So, so the coffee does not appear to be beneficial in improving cognitive function.
Man, I think kudos to you for giving the answer that we needed to hear, but perhaps a lot of us didn't like. It's funny, yeah, because that's my belief as well. Looking at the research, especially for alcohol, a problem with a lot of the alcohol studies are that you have people who drink small amounts of alcohol actually do better than people who drink none. But the problem is in those studies, the alcohol abstaining group, there's quite a few former binge drinkers in there who have reformed their ways. And that might be perhaps why they have worse outcomes than the people who just drink a little bit of alcohol. So that's a potential flaw in the research that I don't see a lot of people talking about. So
sure.
Yeah. So 9:55, we have a couple more messages, and I guess
Michael, can I interrupt quick?
Yeah,
this is Lauren. So Mia had also texted me and messaged me about what Dr. Lorenzetti had sent. So this is just an announcement for everyone quick before we wrap up and answer these last questions. Culinary Track is having like a cook from home virtual cooking class where you can call the number in the chat that Dr. Rosie had put, or there is an email that you can email to register. So it's Dr. Lorenzetti and Dr. Humerick. They're hosting like the cooking live where you can register and then get sent the Zoom link and the recipes that are going to be made so that you can cook along with them from 6 to 7:30 on Monday night. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that as well.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Thank you for that announcement. Certainly tune into that. Again, that's Monday, February 7th. So yeah, I suppose it's 9:56. The Dr. Allison, I guess it's time for you to make your closing statement. Do you have any, last words, whether it's summarizing some of the things we talked about today, or perhaps just one final message of encouragement for us?
Sure. The few things that didn't come up that I was thinking about as preparing for this is the kind of the mass marketing for supplements, and in particular, some of those brain supplements. And the takeaway that hopefully you have alluded to on this discussion or forum before is that there's nothing that beats whole foods and good exercise. And that goes the same for getting older, and specifically for brain health, that the food you take in is much more important than any supplement you can take. The caveat there, which I will stress for everybody, and it does become a little bit more interesting as everyone gets older, is that there are certain disease states that physicians should know about that do require certain supplements. And so don't overlook the fact that your patient might have one of those chronic disease states before you just go and say, no, you absolutely don't need your multivitamin or your B12 or your iron. Why are you taking that? It's silly. Make sure that they don't have an underlying condition that leads to some type of vitamin deficiency. So that's one thing. But then the overarching takeaway is that there is no great no supplement for improving brain function. Great exercise and well-rounded diets are the key. And exercise is all about doing what feels good for the body and not overstressing something. And if you find that something is starting to bother you during your exercise, please talk to your family doctor or primary care doctor and get evaluated. Don't let that go, because we could hopefully figure out what's causing the problem and get you back on your feet and moving again. So don't push it without the recommendation of a primary care doctor, good sources of nutrition, and good sleep. That's also really important for everybody, especially the older adults.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Allison, thank you again for speaking with us today. To everyone in the audience, if you guys wanted to put your name and where you're walking from in the chat, that's something that we always like to see. But yeah, Dr. Allison, thank you so much. We had a great conversation today.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thanks everyone for listening and great questions. And thanks for the invite. I really enjoyed this.
Yes, and again to everyone in the audience, certainly take our survey if you can, just to let us know, what you like about the program, what maybe some things that you feel we could improve on, and if there are any topics that you'd be interested in hearing about in the future. We certainly read all of those responses, so certainly fill out that survey if you get the chance. So yeah, I think that's it, unless one of the other med students has an announcement to make. Yeah, I guess.
All right,
guys.
guys.
All right.
Well, I look
Doctor.
forward to seeing my group on Wednesday, and everyone be safe
sir.
and have a nice weekend.